Finnegan mentions the influence of, more highbrow literature like Robinson Crusoe and James Joyce, but again, he emphasizes as if he were reading a children's book that what inspired him wasn't necessarily the official lesson that he was supposed to get. For instance, he enjoyed Melville, Shakespeare, Eliot, Hemingway, Saul Bellow, Dylan Thomas, and most devastatingly, James Joyce. I saw now in Ventura, California, the snot green sea, the scrotum tightening sea. The hobos from the old fairgrounds at C Street now came scuttling out of Dubliners. I became, in my own mind, Stephen Dedalus, privately sworn to silence, exile, cunning. Regrettably, my hero was afraid of the ocean. Los Angeles was a pallid stand-in for Ireland, but it had its own cultural bogs and treacheries. What Finnegan gets from Joyce is not any concrete lesson like a moral of the tale, but just metaphors, bogs and treacheries that can be translated. It's not like knowledge that could be applied directly in a linear way to one's life, but versatile metaphors that can be translated into one's own idiosyncratic circumstances. So here he talks about, someone asked him a question about transcendence, like the transcendent experience, kind of recalling the transcendentalists Emerson and Thoreau. And Finnegan responds by talking about the idea of how impossible it is finally to narrate such experience.
I was just interested in the transcendence part. I think you're such an amazing writer. Thank you for that. And I think you do such an amazing job of, it's very difficult to write about the transcendent experience of surfing. And I guess I don't know if you could share a particular way that maybe looms very large in your imagination, maybe perhaps many years later, many decades later, and we'll just touch on the transcendence.
Yeah, it's with me often. I mean, it's not usually like one ride. I mean, sometimes they're like peak rides that you will never forget. Although they always seem to, for memory purposes, they need for me some kind of triangulation usually. Like if I'm surfing alone, like no friend out or maybe nobody else out, that's unusual, but it happens. And I often can't remember any of my waves, or it's like there's nothing to bounce off to remember it with. And a lot of the rides you most remember, you're on some great wave and you see your friend paddling over the shoulder, that, and it's that moment that it kind of locks the thing, and it's strange that way, but that's just, those are all moments in individual rides. It's more by the end of a great session, and for me often this is like surfing late in the day, so you surf up to, sun goes down and up to the edge of darkness, and you come in with really cold water can help you come in incredibly tired and just all's right with the world in a way that you can't seem to get to any other way, and I feel anyway just really quiet and really thankful. I mean, the way one should try to be more, but it just comes to you, and often when waves are great, I will find myself sort of dawdling on the shoulder, looking into them, because they're so beautiful. If you're busy surfing, you're acting, reacting. If you're, to just really contemplate the thing is almost a deeper experience for me. And because you don't have the struggle to surf well. And fact, I had a weird thing that is not really an answer to your question, but we were trying to make a podcast in Hawaii about something, I don't know what it was, but it was connected to this book. And these producers sort of wired me up and said, now, talk as you're surfing. And I said, I had a rash guard and a little mic here. And so I paddle out, and the surf was small. It was this place I used to surf as a kid off Diamond Head in Honolulu. And they say, talk, tell us what's going on out there. There are other people around. I can't like start talking to myself. Here comes a wave, there goes a boat. I mean, what? And so they were really frustrated with me. And finally they said, okay, well, you're riding waves. So I couldn't get any waves. They're like the longboard is stealing all the waves. It was hard to get waves. I'd get a couple, and I'd completely forget. I'd ride, and I'd pull out, and then they'd say, you didn't say anything. Okay. And so I stayed out kind of late, end of the day, and a nice last wave came, it was offshore as it started kicking up kind of heavy off the east side of Diamond Head, and it was a nice walled up wave, sort of biggest, best wave that had come. And so I got it and thought, okay, narrate. And as I was catching it, I said, oh, nice. And then all through the ride, I just kept saying, oh, nice. And each little thing. And finally at the end, I stick the last maneuver, nice. And I stick it. And they said, we got 9 nices, not another thing. And it was revealing about one's state of mind in a way. I thought, yeah, I was, how do you think about it? The narrative of it was kind of like moment to moment. And, that rail didn't bog, and this went okay, and the wave got better, and I only had one word, it seems, at my command. I write for a living.
It could have been worse, the word that you chose.
Yes.
Hear about nice, the word nice, just repeating that word, as opposed to being able to narrate experience. It's what I'm trying to say about metaphor. Metaphor is a way of not explaining experience, spelling it out, reducing it to a recipe or a causal sequence, but just kind of pointing at the world, evoking an attitude toward the world, and that experience of triangulation he was talking about, sort of you see what I see, you see me seeing me, this sort of mutual recognition of experience from a subject, mutual recognition of the subject of experience rather than reducing it to objective terms. It reminds me of, remember Zadie Smith in in her piece Peonies talks about writing not as a narrative, explaining a story, but as having your thoughts overheard. So reading someone is not getting a report about what happened in an objective sense, but eavesdropping on their thoughts. So getting inside their head, this again mutual recognition of a kind of subjective experience. He talks similarly about drugs and music. They, in religious terms, he says, when he started smoking pot, that the music became like rapture and prophecy. And he talks about in The Shock of the New, the shortboard revolution. So the role of technology in shaping his dreams as well. So again, this is all to show the kind of accidental role of circumstance in fixing who we are. Not just the accidents of the waves, but the accidents of technology. And economic history. It's interesting that the shortboard revolution takes place in the 60s, becomes a lot more expressive sport, a lot more uh, dangerous, more spectacular. The board becomes much more maneuverable, or it necessarily is much more maneuverable, and kind of high tech than the old longboards. Um, and it's interesting that the same thing happened in climbing. That climbing. Um, the rubber for climbing shoes got a lot more high performance, and the style of climbing um, became similarly a lot more expressive, as well as dangerous. And I think, that it has to do with the baby boom, that, there's a lot more people with leisure time and money to spend on this stuff, and that, therefore more money goes into research and developing new technology. And you see it all the time, like the way, skis, the technology of skis and bicycles and just all these different recreational or athletic shoes, running shoes, are always changing. And so that changes who we are, in the sense that it changes how an athlete uh, performs, and what an athlete desires. Aspirations of athletes, or the aspirations for adventure, are modified by technology, also in terms of the media that represent adventure. So like the videos that I saw when I was getting excited about climbing, are very different from climbing videos now. So and a huge difference has to do with the drone technology. So here, in the old days, when the only way to film climbers was if other climbers were, just held a camera and looked at them, and shot them while they were climbing, and so the point of view was very restricted. So take a look at what that looks like.
You got it? Yeah, I got it. All right, good job. Morning. And now I presume if I fall out, what I do is flatten myself on the rock and hope the terry cloth. Yeah, well, let me know what you're doing so I can feed you slack. I don't want
So
to.
you could only take pictures from on the cliff.
Working on the new crack system, Beverly shows the patience and ingenuity needed for a long climb. Soon after her lateral movement on the rope,
I mean, they have, cameramen like next to the climb taking these pictures, but they're still like having to hang on ropes right next to the cliff.
Does it look all right above you? Yeah.
This is the most typical kind of climbing shot for real climbers. It's just like straight up at the climber's butt. So it's interesting that development of new technology, new filmmaking technology like drones, because you'd think like shooting film of climbing by climbers on the cliff right next to the activity itself, that's really authentic. Like it's you're filming, you're involved in the activity while you're filming it. um, Whereas drones are totally abstract, like they're taking pictures from out in the sky. That's a totally unnatural perspective. That seems very strange, and would seem to evoke much less of what climbing's like. But in fact, it's just the opposite. Climbing evokes much more. I mean, the drones give you way better feeling of what it's like to be on a cliff than the more authentic or more intimate and proximal kind of technology. So here's some of what that looks like in this film, Free Solo, about Alex Honnold. Finnegan has some more to say here about what what waves, surfing, nature, adventure teach you about yourself, but how that's also inextricable from the actual circumstances of the experience. It can't be generalized into a narrative. It's just you recognize it when you see it, and we use our media of communication, be it poetry or cinema or just language or body language, to evoke it indirectly to one another, but it's hard to reduce to a formula, an abstractable, generalizable formula. And here he discusses the great surfer Kelly Slater and what makes him so great on the one hand, and then the artificial wave that Slater has built, and the way Finnegan describes it is, it's exactly what you always wanted, but it's not the thing at all.
Kelly Slater, this 11-time world champion, just pulled back the curtain on a thing he's been developing for many years. It's out in the Central Valley near Bakersfield, I'm told. An artificial wave pool. I mean, there are these artificial wave pools, these really kind of crummy simulacra of waves all over the place, but they've never really caught on because the wave isn't very good. Well, Slater's wave is really, really, really good. It's a quantum, many quantum leaps from everything that's ever been made artificially, this thing he's just revealed. And it's this beautiful, incredible machine made, but just, flawless wave. And of course he makes it look incredible, but it's not open to the public, but he's had a few friends, other pro surfers come, and they make it look pretty incredible too. And so there's one part of the sort of surfing nervous system that says, I gotta have it, I gotta ride that wave, let me at it. And then there's everything else. And it's, it's quite the existential question right now in a way in surfing, because they're gonna be able to replicate this thing, presumably just a machine, all over the world. And people are gonna be able to surf, exciting waves, not just junk, everywhere, anywhere that they can afford these things. And what is it? And the weird thing is that Slater, for instance, is such a great surfer, and what you get when you watch him surf is, and this is surfers and even non-surfers. I remember my daughter was about 2 or 3, and as usual, kind of on my knee watching surf videos. Like, what are we looking at, Daddy? And we were just watching a video, and he came on among the other people surfing, and she just suddenly, her eye went to it. And she says, "Oh, he's." That word again. He's so nice. He's so nice. Why is he so nice? And I'd say, because he's the best surfer in the world. That's why. Anyway, when you see Slater, for instance, do some incredible thing in incredible ways, what often you're responding to is, how did he know that? He has amazing athletic ability, but it's what he knows about what the ocean is going to do and how he might react sort of creatively, aggressively, progressively, just like magically. His sense of the ocean is so deep. And that's true of the few most exciting surfers in the world. There's a guy in Hawaii named John Florence. Same thing. Right now, he's younger. You just watch him, and how did he know? It's impossible from where he was to understand what that wave was going to do. I can't tell looking at it and how he's in it. But this machine wave has none of that. You ordered it up, you dialed it in. It's just going to do what it does in this tank with a flat bottom. And so there's some way in which it's theologically dead. I mean, it's just not. The ocean's not surfing, and Slater wouldn't argue that it is, but it's quite a challenge. Oh, this is what you always wanted, but it's not the thing at all. So it's this real kind of conundrum. Actually, I'm hoping to interview him about that, get him to talk about this and other things. I'd like to, he's a smart guy. and he's been working on this in secret. I mean, the engineers and that he hired to do this, and who finally figured it out. So here, I mean, most people probably haven't seen this, but it is mesmerizing, especially for surfers, because it just goes and goes. I mean, 30-second tubes, just unheard of. I don't want to call it perfection. That's a overused and misused word, but just, mechanical regularity, let us say.
The Uncanny Valley is a term that was developed initially by robot makers that has to do with the uncanny effect that a humanoid or a puppet has when it gets somewhat close to live human appearance, but not entirely. So the sense of familiarity increases the more human-like the figure, up until a certain space. And there's this gap here where it's close enough to be disturbing, but not close enough to seem actually lifelike. So I think that's an interesting way to think about what I was just talking about with the drones, because it's an increase in artifice. Shooting, climbing with drones is a more artificial, more surreal technology, but it comes closer to evoking the natural live experience. So I think that's an interesting way of thinking about the role of technology in our representation to one another. That it's not about just assimilating to some natural standard of actual live human likeness. But it's instead about achieving a kind of more like aesthetic consensus about what human likeness is like. It's an artistic construct. It's like a metaphor for human likeness, rather than just an absolute natural standard. Speaking of unlikely role models, a movie that really inspired me when I was young was this movie Breaking Away, about this guy that wants to become a bicycle racer. But it's not just that he wanted to become a bicycle racer, he wanted to become an Italian bicycle racer. It's just interesting to me, the role of artifice, what seems natural or realistic, often has little to do with what actually inspires and, governs our real behavior.
Enrico Giamande spends 8 hours a day training to be the finest racer in all of Italy. But Enrico has a problem. He's not in Italy. He's in Bloomington, Indiana.
Papa! Ciao, Pop!
And he's not Enrico Giamande.
I should have hit him when I had the chance. He'd be dead now. Oh, grazie, Tante Santa Maria.
He's Dave Stoller.
He was as normal as pumpkin pie, and now look at him.
But Dave's not crazy.
He's never tired. He's never miserable.
He's on the road to adulthood.
When I was young, I was tired and miserable. You are numero uno, King Papa.
And he's decided to take a little detour at the age of 19.
What are we going to do about it?
I don't know, dear. We could always strangle him while he's asleep.
20th Century Fox presents Breaking Away, the story of 4 guys in imminent danger of turning 20.
So again, there's no map, there's no abstract formula for desires, for the cultural values that we pursue and try to embody. We have to communicate those. They're too rich. There's too much to be said about what we want. We can't reduce it to an explicit narrative or explanation or code or formula. I think this is what Tolstoy meant in the famous first sentence of Anna Karenina. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. That stories are good for analyzing trouble, accident, unhappiness. They're good for mobilizing our analytical intelligence to see how things go wrong. Narratives are not so good at recounting happiness. Happiness is boring to narrate, but happiness is it's metaphors are good for evoking happiness as an aspiration. Metaphors share, transmit, communicate the happiness as a goal, something to shoot for, but the actual achievement of it is kind of pointless to narrate, or at least boring. So, like in Zadie Smith's narrative of learning to appreciate Joni Mitchell, there's no narrative to it really. She just says there's 1 minute I couldn't hear her or I couldn't stand her, and the next minute I totally adored her. It's that leap of faith that is communicated, that it's a visionary experience that you might mimic. So that's sort of what I was suggesting about breaking away. What gets transmitted is the passion that is sort of kind of craziness evokes passion more than supposed realism, or that's to say that irrational exuberance is more realistic of our experience of the pursuit of cultural meaning than a consequential narrative that makes coherent sense in some kind of causal way.